going on, everyone? So if you guys are watching this video right now, there's probably a good chance you've already seen my day 4 video from Death Valley, and you kind of know what happens. Basically, I severely damaged my 8x10 camera because it got blown down overnight. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with shooting large format and specifically 8x10, it might seem absolutely crazy that I would leave a camera set up overnight, especially in an area with wind. And so what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about why I did that and kind of why I've been doing that through the years, because this is not the first trip I left my camera overnight. I've been doing that since all the way back to 2010 is when I first started doing that. And here's the reason why. When you're setting up a large format camera, your viewfinder is the ground glass on the back of the camera. And during the day, if you're setting up a photo, yeah, that sort of dark cloth you throw over so that you can really look at that ground glass, because otherwise it's really dim and it's kind of hard to see. So even during the day, you have to use that dark cloth in order to kind of see what you're doing. But if I was trying to set up a photo before sunrise, it's really, really hard to do because you don't have a lot of light to work with. And the ground glass is so dim, it's really hard to see your composition, let alone critical things like focusing and movements and all the other stuff that you gotta do. But also, it takes a little while to set up a camera like that. When I had my 4x5 camera, I was pretty fast setting it up. I can kind of get things set up and locked down in just a few minutes. With the 8x10, probably the absolute fastest I could do it would be about 10-15 minutes, but that would be with me rushing and probably making lots of mistakes along the way. In a perfect world, I'd like to have about an hour where I can kind of set up the camera, figure out the composition, make all these sort of decisions that I have to make in order to make the photo turn out as good as I can possibly do with it. So I like to have the time to kind of sit there and work with the camera. So I went on a trip in 2010. I went to the north rim of the Grand Canyon, a place called Torweep. It's an area that you see quite a few photos from because it's a pretty cool vantage point where you actually have a view down at the river. There's a pretty dramatic sandstone ledge and cliff and all that kind of on the left side. But it's a place that is traditionally shot during the morning. And it was on that trip that I realized the only way I could really take that photo is if I were to set up my camera the day before and leave it overnight, and then come back to it the next morning. Everything's gonna be set. The camera's gonna be focused. Everything is ready to go. All I have to do is throw the film holder in there, make my exposure, and I can sort of relax and enjoy the sunrise as opposed to being rushed and probably making mistakes along the way. There's another bonus to this as well, which is in many locations, sunrise is a very quiet and very calm sort of thing. Sunset can be very windy, as is the case in Death Valley. But it's good to be able to shoot in the morning because I don't have to worry about the wind shaking the camera and then creating a blurry image as a result of that. So on that trip on to the Grand Canyon, I had my camera set up at a relatively low angle. There was definitely no real issues with it getting blown over there. But I did hang a stuff sack from it, and I put a bunch of dirt and rocks and stuff in it to really weight it down. And I had absolutely no problem on that trip. I will sometimes take just a big trash bag and cover it over the camera itself as kind of a simple rain cover. Or if there's chance of sand and stuff getting blown around, just to kind of keep it clean and keep it protected. But I've been doing that every year since then. And going on trips to places like Death Valley, I'll leave the camera set up overnight. Probably, if it's a week-long trip, it might be spending 5 nights out somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Another thing that people sometimes ask is, am I worried about people finding the camera and damaging it, hurting it, stealing it, whatever? Where I typically leave the camera, no one's gonna be able to find it. I stick with it all the way through sunset. And the only way for me to find it before sunrise is to use a handheld GPS, because I marked the location for it so I can find it in the morning. But the other question some of you guys might have is, well, why don't you just have a quick release on your tripod head? And that way you can simply take the camera off, put it on the ground, you can take it back to camp. And that's a very, very good question. But I'm gonna kind of show you why I haven't done that in the past. This is the tripod head that I use for the 8x10 camera. And I went through several different tripod heads until I finally found that this one did a good job. Basically, I need to have something with 2 screws so that the camera can't twist on there. and a very large, wide platform. That way the camera can't rock or kind of move around on there. It's from Gitzo. It's not a particularly crazy expensive head. It's probably a few $100, but for Gitzo, that's not a heck of a lot of money. But it's really solid. And this thing has, I don't know, I've used this thing ever since 2009. And this thing has been beat up quite heavily. This is the exact head that my camera was mounted to when it got trashed. And I don't even have to worry about the head getting damaged because it's just built to last forever. But the main thing is I have a very large platform there, but it's really awkward trying to take the camera off of this if it's already set up. So my plan for going forward to make this not happen anymore is to get a different tripod head. And it's a very expensive one, but hopefully it's one that will allow me to not keep breaking cameras. So this is the tripod head that I'm going to be using from now on. This is called the Cube from Arca Swiss. It will use a Arca Swiss type quick release, and I have a pretty long quick release plate that I'm going to have mounted to the camera. And in a perfect world, I'd also want to have supports that run this way on the plate, kind of like a big H, so that way it can't rock on the plate at all. But this is a geared head, so basically as I turn the knobs, it changes the orientation of the camera. But it's really solid because you have this large shape here as opposed to a ball head with a single stem, which you could have a little bit of movement on. So my plan is to use this head so that I can quickly and easily take the camera off of the tripod head. And if I'm in place like where I was the morning that my camera was destroyed in the video, I was pretty close to my truck. So I could take my camera off and then kind of awkwardly walk it back to my truck, put it in my truck and keep it with me. If I'm further out, if I'm a mile or so out from the nearest road, I'll just take a trash bag. I'll put my camera in that trash bag, kind of close it up and put it on the ground next to it. Because ultimately, if it's really windy and that camera just gets knocked over when it's on the ground, it's not gonna hurt anything. But if it's on top of this, it's an issue. I also will need to make sure I protect this head very well too, because I don't want this to take a tumble, because that also would really suck. So if you think about it, if the camera is set in place, there's only 3 directions for it to fall over. I mean, it can fall over this way, or this way. And it all involves one of the legs of the tripod starting to lift off the ground. So ultimately, I need to find a way to weight down the tripod even better. I've put a lot of weight, probably 30, 40 pounds hanging from the hook on the tripod. But it still gets blown over. And at a certain point, if you have that weight up there, once it starts going, that weight is gonna pull it down to the ground in a very not good way. So I need to come up with a way of basically having the tripod legs staked into the ground if it's an area where it's appropriate to do that. If it's not an area where it's appropriate to do that, I need to have them, the tripod legs hooked to some sort of plate of some sort that I could put some weight on to weight it down so it won't move. Tricky thing is sand dunes, because that stuff really doesn't work very well. But I definitely am not proud of the fact that my camera got destroyed. It really sucks that happened. I'm gonna work really hard to make sure it doesn't happen again. But I have been doing this for 8 years now. I've been leaving my camera out so many different times, and this is the first time that anything really bad has happened as a result of that. So I just wanted to do this video to say that I'm not completely irresponsible with my gear. I've been doing this for a while. Stuff happens, stuff can be fixed, but I need to come up with a better plan so this doesn't happen again. I want to thank everyone for watching, and we'll see you around next week.